Anyone can play this game easily. You hold one end of a rope, the other end of which is connected to a small ball, and throw it so that the rope circles horizontally over your head. However, there is a phenomenon hidden in this movement that is quite strange. Because we can only recognize three forces from this movement. The centripetal force pulling to the left, Fn, the centrifugal force pulling to the right, Fz, the Earth's gravity pulling down, mg. The question now is how a dynamic balance can be created from these three forces so that the rope rotates on a horizontal plane. In order to be able to establish this balance, it requires an upward pulling force, the strength of which must be exactly the same as that of gravity. But where is this power supposed to come from? Without much thought, we can already state that it is after the previous physical knowledge is not possible to explain this movement. No one would have thought that in the 21st century, with our knowledge of science, we would not be able to explain this simple phenomenon. Anyone who says that this is an insignificant problem is wrong. Because this is a fundamental physical knowledge. If the foundation is faulty, the building built on it is in great danger. Some claim that while Newton's mechanics are fully understood, classical mechanics is outdated, inadequate, and uninteresting. Is it really like that? Or have we overestimated ourselves? We take some examples below to see if that's actually the case. As we know for a long time that a rotating body of revolution remains in its axial direction. This property is already widely used. However, his mysterious behavior has not been unraveled to this day, and it is also not clear from what force this arose. How large must a force be to force the axis of a gyroscope to tilt? Apparently no one has been able to answer this simple question either. We know what centrifugal force is. For example, if a ball on a cone pendulum revolves around point O, an outward pulling force is created, the centrifugal force. The strength of this centrifugal force, acceleration, is, according to today's school physics, without a doubt. But that is wrong. The dynamic balance of this motion is that AZ cosine theta balances with G sine theta at this position. But if theta is 90 degrees, AZ cosine theta would be 0. That doesn't agree with reality. This basic knowledge of physics is also wrong. Then you ask yourself, how credible is our physics really? We also learned in school how to calculate the trajectory of a stone's throw. We may also know that this method of determining the trajectory applies only to speeds approximately attainable by hand throwing. At higher speeds, this method no longer applies. It is true that the higher the speed, the greater the deviation of the calculation result from reality. At a certain high throwing speed, this method totally fails. Why is this? Is there a method that is valid for all speeds? So far, we have only been able to describe the mathematical pendulum only for very small angles, and only if the angles theta are considered to be approximately equal to sine theta, and only approximately mathematically. At a somewhat larger angle, this calculation is no longer correct. Here, too, there is a phenomenon that we have not been able to explain. Why can the pendulum keep moving upwards through the neutral point zero against the Earth's gravity? We can use the rule potential energy equals kinetic energy to calculate the speed of the pendulum at point zero. This does not answer the question, however, because speed is not a force. There must be a force here, but what force is it? The inertia, yes, you are right. But the question is, how great is this inertial force? Does it have anything to do with speed? This is a major issue, force, which plays a major role in physics. But what actually is force? And how did it come about? Apparently nobody has answered these questions correctly so far. All of the above examples involve curvilinear motion, circling and rotating, which is not captured by Newton's laws. So we know that Newton's laws are flawed because they only apply to linear motion, which in reality hardly exist. The movement in a straight line is only a special case of the movement in the general sense. In practice we have usually treated a curve approximately as a straight line. Strictly speaking, however, straight line movements cannot be transferred to circular movements. As the example above shows, many phenomena cannot be properly explained using Newton's laws, or their calculation leads to incorrect results. Because all celestial bodies also rotate and revolve. If we do not understand such movements, then we cannot properly explain what is happening in the sky. The previous celestial mechanics is based on an implausible and unbelievable basis: all bodies that move, move on forever. This is obviously not true. Without being propelled by a force, a body cannot move forever. Nature has provided us with a force, gravity. As the sun rotates, its gravitational field also rotates. Because the sun attracts all planets are propelled by the sun's rotating gravitational field in the tangential direction. We can think of it analogously to an electric motor whose rotating magnetic field drives the rotor. Even such a simple and clear phenomenon was not recognized by anyone. But if the planets were driven by the sun's gravitational field, it was feared that their orbital speeds would increase indefinitely. Because according to current knowledge, the speed of an accelerated body will continue to increase over time. This equation is also not correct in general. This is because it only applies to straight line motion, i.e. to a special case of motion that does not actually exist. The inertia with which a body remains in its state of motion limits the speed of a driven body to a maximum. It can be calculated that a planet is accelerated by the Sun's gravitational field to just the speed necessary for it to orbit the Sun. On the other hand, when gravitational field of one body accelerates another body, logically the movement of a body is also slowed down by gravitational field of another when it passes through gravitational field or rotates in gravitational field. With these properties of the gravitational field, many inexplicable phenomena in the sky can be unraveled, for example, why the Moon has the bound rotation and why Venus rotates retrograde. As said, the orbit of the planets around the Sun was caused by the rotating gravitational field of the Sun. This puts a heavy strain on the rotation of the Sun. If the Sun's rotation were not caused by some other force, its rotation would eventually come to a standstill because of loading. So there must be a force that drives our Sun or the solar system. But where does this indispensable force for our solar system come from? Gravity, which nature has given us free of charge, does not answer this question. Because if gravity isn't powered, it can't do work forever. We have to accept that mass is a neutral thing that has neither force nor energy and therefore cannot move by itself. Mass is also not converted into energy. Therefore, the essence of Newton's law of gravitation, according to which every mass particle attracts another with a force, is wrong. This is a fundamental flaw in today's classical mechanics. With this law, Newton steered physics in the wrong direction. But where does the force come from anyway? If, for example, two cars collide, forces are created for both cars, with which they repel each other. So the force arises when the movement of the mass body is prevented. This is the basis of forces generation. The generation of force in a body is the reverse process, the acceleration of a body by a force. This means that force and motion are correlated, force creates motion, motion creates force when motion is prevented. And this prevention in nature, e.g. for a celestial body, is realized by a natural property of the mass body, inertia. Did force actually come from movement? At first glance, that doesn't seem plausible. But if we think of the examples of the flung ball and the gyroscope, it becomes clear, the ball and the axis of the gyroscope can only hold their position if an appropriate force is applied. And these forces are obviously caused by the circling of the ball or the rotation of the gyroscope. Without these movements, the ball would fall and tilt the axle. This is the mechanical basis of the interaction, through which forces are generated for both bodies involved. This is really an interaction between force and motion, an infinite loop of force, motion, force, motion. We now know that force arises from interaction. But we still don't know how this interaction works at all. As said, the orbit of the planets around the Sun was caused by the rotation of the Sun. So, without rotation, there would be no orbiting either. But why do all celestial bodies rotate? Rotation and circulation are also connected. Thus there is no circulation without rotation. So, rotation and orbit are the fundamental phenomena in the sky. If we cannot explain them properly, we must question the correctness of all previous theories and interpretations of movements and events in the sky. When two bodies interact with each other, they must be bound in a system and their behavior is influenced by each other. Thus, the entanglement phenomenon can also be explained mechanically. A system in which two bodies move forever without additional energy is what we call a sovereignty system. Under certain conditions, this system can be formed from any two bodies, e.g. from two stars in a double star system or from two oxygen atoms in one oxygen molecule. Even in the microscopic world, all particles are constantly rotating and circling. Don't the same principles apply on a small scale as on a large scale? Then all microscopic particles would have to have been created by a sovereignty system. From the outside, a sovereignty system is a single body. For example, a hydrogen atom formed from a nucleus and an electron is usually viewed as a single body. The whole material world has come into existence through various sovereignty systems. However, if all natural forces are explained with the sovereignty system, for example, we consider the hydrogen atom as a sovereignty system formed by an electron and an atomic nucleus, and almost all mysteries about natural forces in the microscopic world could be solved at once become as follows. How the force between the nucleus and the electron was created. Why an electron runs around a nucleus forever, why electron and nucleus rotate constantly, where the energy and power needed for these movements comes from, why the nucleus and the electron are entangled, how the interaction works at all. All natural forces arose from the mechanism of interaction. Thus, all natural forces can be combined in a single system. We will see that this is straightforward and that we can describe the system with a simple equation. This is the result of real physics, which examines things strictly logically on the basis of real events. Until then, we must first learn how to solve the slinging ball problem. So we have to relearn the physics from the beginning, which requires a profound rethinking. As already mentioned, there is a basic knowledge missing in previous physics, inertia, which was not properly understood by either Newton or Einstein, but which plays an extremely important role in all areas of physics. In the following videos, from Real Physics, number 2, to Real Physics, number 42, listed below in the comments box, we will explain all these problems in detail step by step, always real and concrete, as well as backed up with understandable mathematics. Physics, in our opinion, must be absolutely real and concretely mechanical. This is a borderline between physics and science fiction. Thank you very much for your attention.